Peace. This video is about the wicked one and his disciples who are known as the Sorcerers, and I am going to talk about their ancient tradition and their ancient opposition to the truth, because as it says that there are two paths, the one broad and destructive and the other narrow and living. And so set over one are the angels of Satan, and set over the other are the angels of God. And so Satan, having his time through the fall of men, or should I say through the fall of man, which brought in 7 ages of death, and his sorcerers, which by their witchcraft deceive men into their worship, i.e. the sorcerer is worshipped as God, and this is where the tradition of the false gods come from. And this, when I came across this information, everything clicked. It was amazing for me to read and to comprehend and kind of connect all the dots and discover the truth about how Satan's devices and deceits are wrought in the earth. And the basis of his deceit is threefold. It is the sorcerer, the idol, and the demon. Those three are the three cornerstones of demonic power that is wrought in the earth. But I wanted to read something that put me onto this path in Eusebius church history, which is found in book 3, the 26th chapter, where he talks about Menander the sorcerer. And it says that it was indeed an artifice of the devil to endeavour, by means of such sorceries who assumed the name of Christians, to defame the great mystery of godliness by magic art, and through them to make ridiculous the doctrines of the church concerning the immortality of the soul and the resurrection of the dead. But they that have chosen these men as their saviours have fallen away from the true hope. So you remember how you might have read in the book of Revelation where it talks about Mystery Babylon the Great, and the verse says, "For by your sorceries were all the nations deceived." And so if I was to read again what it says in the Eusebius church history, and it was indeed an artifice of the devil to endeavour, by means of such sorcerers who assumed the name of Christians, to defame the great mystery of godliness by magic art, and through them to make ridiculous the doctrines of the church. So we can see here that they don't come to you saying, "I'm a sorcerer." They come to you saying, "I'm a Christian," and they take over the church and implement Baal worship. And I'm going to show how those two are inextricably linked: the worship of Baal and witchcraft. And as it says in the Bible, they come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ravening wolves. And again it says the second beast had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke as a dragon. These things start to become clear when you actually understand the root of this evil. Now, witchcraft came into the world through the fallen angels, and it's recorded in the book of Enoch how this happened. And so this particular text that I have, it says, "Fallen angels taught men that demons could, by certain art, that is by magical invocations, be made to obey men." So the origin of demons, many demons are from the offspring of fallen angels and women, and the giants and the monsters that were created by the fallen angels, when those when those spirits were disembodied, they became evil spirits upon the earth. And it's not so commonly known that these demons cause sicknesses if you commit sin. If you commit sin, then the demon can come and possess you, but also they can make you ill, they can destroy you, they can drive you deeper into sin, they can make people commit suicide. And so, as I've mentioned in other videos, these demons who are still on the earth today can be seen at night as wandering stars. It's mentioned in Jude, wandering stars. So, if where you live, if you have clear skies and you look up, you can see these stars flying across the sky. So it says, fallen angels taught men that demons could by certain arts, that is, by magical invocations, be made to obey men. And so, as from a furnace and workshop of wickedness, they filled the whole world with the smoke of impiety. And for these and some other causes, a flood was brought upon the world. All were destroyed except the family of Noah, who survived with his 3 sons and their wives. One of these, by name Ham, unhappily discovered the magical act and handed down the instruction of it to one of his sons, who was called Mizraim, from whom the race of the Egyptians, Babylonians and Persians are descended. So this is important to the context of this video. As to the left hand, that is the hand of wrath, and the prince of that wrath, the devil. That the continuity of this evil practice was continued after the flood through Ham, and he gave rise to the nations of Egypt, Babylon and Persia. So if we look at those nations in the Bible, they're constantly shown to be the enemies of Israel, and that the Israelites would learn the worship of Baal and Ashtaroth from these particular nations. So Mizraim, you can see in the book of Chronicles with the genealogy, you can see him being one of his 4 sons. As it says, the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put and Canaan. That's 1 Chronicles chapter 1 verse 8. And so if the devil now has set up Egypt, Babylon and Persia, we can see the reasons as to why these nations were wicked, and they had what's called the worship of Baal. And I've become convinced that Baal is this same Mizraim, who was the son of Ham, because Mizraim was a powerful sorcerer, and the people who were deceived by him thought he was a god. And we're going to read exactly as to the reasons as to why that is. But it seems to be that Mizraim was able to control a particular demon and bring down lightning from this demon. And he performed this over and over again, to the point where the demon became angry with the sorcerer, and the demon destroyed the sorcerer Mizraim with one of these lightning bolts. And so lightning came down and set him on fire, and all that was left was a smouldering heap of coals and fire. So it says that the Persian fire worship came from this, because they falsely perceived that this Mizraim was a god, and he had taken himself up into heaven in a flash of lightning. And the Persians built a temple on the spot of where they perceived that he was taken up into heaven falsely, and began this what's called Persian fire worship, which actually still exists to this day, where they take horses and leap over a fire. So, as I was saying, when Noah and his sons were on the ark, you basically have the church. You know, the Noah being king of the whole earth in a true sense of monarchy, just one king. And then everything else beyond one king is a polyarchy, the multiple kings. But Noah was one king. And as they exit the ark, you therefore have one family, and Noah had taken books onto the ark, such as the Book of Enoch, and many other books also that he had. But his son Shem also wrote a book. There was a book of Noah, there's a book of Shem, there's a book of Enoch, there's a book of Adam. And so this is basically the church. And so with Ham departing into witchcraft, which I'm unsure as to how that happened, we don't have a text, we just have a reference that this happened. It's like the first apostasy after the flood. And Ham creating Egypt, we can see that Egypt also is a center of witchcraft in Alexandria, where even today it's highly esteemed among these secret societies, with these houses such as Golden Dawn being esteemed within their device. So if we now move on to, in the book of Moses, Genesis, we look at just before the Exodus, where God was going to send plagues. Then Moses goes to Pharaoh and wishes that the Israelites be released, and he takes a staff and performs the miracle that God says to throw the staff down, and the staff becomes a serpent. We can see that Pharaoh has sorcerers there, and the sorcerers perform the same feat using magical incantation. So it isn't written in the Bible who this sorcerer is, but they are referenced. Some of the sorcerers, it's multiple sorcerers, but they are referenced by Paul, where it says, as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses. So these Jannes and Jambres are the sons of Balaam, and Balaam is a sorcerer. It's not mentioned in the Bible that he is a sorcerer. It just says they call him a prophet. So he's a prophet in the sense of a false prophet, as it's saying, as I said earlier, that they wish to bring people into the worship of themselves. So you have Balaam, Jannes and Jambres, and we can see here that there's two sides. There's the dark side and there's the light side, and then we have an emulation by the dark of the things of the light. And it says no marvel that Satan is transformed into an angel of light, which thing he actually performed to Adam, to deceive Adam. The devil transformed himself into one of God's angels to try and draw him away. And so the emulation that I see by the sorcerers in Pharaoh's court is very much the same as what I read in the Eusebius church history, where it says it was an artifice of the devil by means of such sorcerers who assumed the name of Christians to defame the great mystery of godliness by magic art. So we can see that the devil's ministers impersonate the ministers of righteousness. So we have Egypt now as the centre of this evil, and the Israelites leave Egypt. Balaam pursues them and conspires with Balak to send the daughters of Moab into them, and some of them commit fornication and then are cursed into the worship of Baal. We see again the two things linked: the worship of Baal, sorcery, and the worship of Baal, as we can see when we research into it with the discoveries that were made in the Holy Land. There are altars, and the sign of Baal seems to be a cross within a circle, which denotes solstices and equinoxes. And some of these Christian so-called churches, like the Church of England, still use this. They use this it's called the wheel of the year. So if you look at it, it's really a wheel, but they say it's a cross. Okay, so the circular aspect of it is like the revolution of the year and the seasons. And if you were to watch some of the videos on the winter solstice in England with the Druids, there was a particular Druid explaining that it was about the rebirth. That's what he says, it's about rebirth. So what do? They go down to Stonehenge on the 22nd of December, and the sun lines up through their stones, and they see that the sun is being reborn, because it was receding. The hours of daylight were receding, but now they're increasing again, and they see this as a rebirth. And it links into these, it's like sun worship, but also linked into these tales of how these sorcerers were supposedly reborn. You have Nimrod, Semiramis, and the son called, at the S-O-N son called Tammuz, who was the reborn sun god, who's mentioned in the book of Ezekiel. And so if you look at these churches, the High Church, for example, the Roman Catholic Church, you call it Anglican Church, all of these nations who are deceived into the sorceries, as it mentions in the book of Revelation, are observing the winter solstice, aren't they? They lie about it, saying it's the birth of Christ, but it's actually the rebirth of the sun, the S-U-N. In Spain, they call it the Navidad, the Nativity, and they put out these banners with an infant on there. If you want to see some of the imagery of Baal in the Roman Catholic Church, they use a baby with wings on. They call it cherub. It's actually Tammuz. This is their infant birth. This is the rebirth of the sun. This is the Baal worship. It's mentioned in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 8, the chambers of imagery, where the 70 elders of the house of Israel had their backs towards the Lord, and they faced the sun and worshipped the sun in the east. So Simon Magus, who we're introduced to in Acts 8, but they don't call him Simon Magus, they call him Simon the Sorcerer. He learnt magic in Egypt, yet he was a disciple of John the Baptist. Because when the apostles, they go to lay their hands on these disciples of John in Samaria, Simon Magus is there. It doesn't say he's the leader, but John had already been beheaded. John the Baptist had been beheaded, and his disciples elected a leader called Eusebius. Now, at this point, Simon the Sorcerer is in Egypt. He comes back, and Eusebius is in charge, and Simon Magus desires to take over the disciples of John the Baptist, but he bides his time. But he has an argument with Eusebius, and Eusebius takes his staff and goes to strike Simon Magus. but it passes through him like smoke. And rather much like Mizraim being struck down with a lightning bolt and the people perceiving that he was a god and taken up into heaven, this Decetheus perceived that he was Christ, that he was, as Simon had said, that he was the Christ, and he performed magic to deceive them, and therefore Simon Magus becomes the first false Christ. Because in Matthew 24 it says, false Christ shall rise up and deceive many as a sign of the last days, and that happened immediately. The last days happened at the cross. They give you a false theology to trick you, you see. The last days are a very long time, they're 2,000 years. So Simon Magus becomes the first false Christ, and the body of Antichrist forms, because Christ, the body of Christ is a body, so is the body of Christ. Whatever is against Christ goes into the body of Antichrist. And Simon Magus goes about deceiving people by magic arts and proclaiming that he is the Christ. And he goes from Samaria north up through the regions of Tripoli, Syria, etc., and he goes into Asia Minor, goes all through the towns there, and he basically slanders Peter and says that he's the sorcerer, and then Peter follows him and he has to remedy the damage Simon's done. But they both end up in Rome, and Simon Magus dies in Rome when Peter dispels the magic art, where Peter flies above the crowds in order to deceive them that he is a god. So Peter dispels the demons. He negates the demonic power, because the demons are lifting him up. The demons are invisible, but people see Simon flying. And so Simon falls and dies in Rome. But Rome, interestingly, becomes the first church to apostatize into Baal worship when, midway through the 2nd century, Pius I moves the Passover to the following Sunday. Now, Sunday was the day where the Romans would worship the sun. And so Rome becomes Babylon the Great. So in this history, this kind of chronological pathway that I've explained, we can see how the devil looks to impersonate the truth and set up an imitation so that believers may not believe in the light, that is, that they are deceived into the imitation and that they follow Baal. And then you have, in times following the times that I've mentioned, you have the Knights Templars, who were like a Crusader order. They started out as a Crusader order, and they would accompany people to Jerusalem. And they were thrust out by the Pope at the time, because there was rumours that he was kind of jealous of them, and he used the King of France to purge them. Some of them were burnt alive in France, and then the remnant escaped apparently into London, and they were responsible for setting up the City of London, because the Knights Templars used to loan people money, but they were accused of things such as witchcraft, worshipping Baphomet, and molesting children. And so if you look into the Illuminati, because the Knights Templars were also called Freemasons, and the Illuminati, which was, we're told, established by Adam Weishaupt from Bavaria. He was a Jesuit, i.e. the Counter-Reformation infiltrated Freemasonry, And now you have this new age that we're living through, which witches such as Blavatsky wrote about, where they wanted to bring in the demons of Hindu and Buddha into the West. And then you have Queen Elizabeth II, at her funeral, they break the wand. And when I saw that, I thought she definitely was a witch. There were always these outlandish stories about her turning into a lizard, and I would never believe that. But since I saw them break this wand, and some of the research I've done into this black magic and the things that they do that were linked into biblical sources, i.e. the apostles would warn about what the power of these sorcerers was and what they did, that they could shapeshift. And so I thought, yeah, maybe that is true. Maybe the Queen of England was a high-ranking witch, and certainly how she ran the country of England from her coronation fits in with that conclusion also, that she's done all the things that is mentioned in the book of the Kings of Israel, where they would perform all this wickedness. And if you look at when Josiah purges the land, it said he broke down the houses of the Sodomites. So sodomy is clearly also part of their religion, and what they're doing now is an externalization upon society, where they're trying to condition the nations into all the wickedness that they've always done in secret. So, as it says, forewarned is forearmed. If you have the knowledge and you're warned and you understand, then these are great weapons to wield against the ancient enemy.